taking the piece of reason, shaping a peaceless season. Reason to keep believing, waking the beast who's sleeping. Let go this destiny, you're caught in a trance, ever marking time inside a dream, no sight of advance. You see, the mortal core we serve is hot like a spring. Step back, two step, 1, 2, 3. Our world's a fantasy, no more than a test, ever feeding off the fallacy, creating this mess. Deep down inside this bleak machine with all of the rest. Break free, two-face, electricity. Time turning up the volume, time turning on as always. No time enough tomorrow for turning back to where we began. 22 sectors tested, fragments in one direction. Celestial noise detected, delirium unsuspected. 32 sectors tested, fragments in one direction. Celestial noise detected, delirium unsuspected. Presented, dive into 323. Arrested destiny, alone in a trance. No escaping from this waking dream, no hope of advance. You see, the mortal core we serve is not but a spring. Unwind, too slow, too quick, too much to believe. Your world's a fantasy, you failed the test, ever forging on new fallacies, creating more mess. Directly through this bleak machine with all the rest. DC, dying, electricity. Presented, falling back right into the system of falling back on all that's erased when fighting back. Right out of the system means falling back right into the space, yes, falling back right in with the system who'll see you falling back to the end. When falling back is better than simply falling back into pieces again. Silence, still breathing, memory writing, reading, ever repeat, deleting, radicals flowing free, and energy slowly seeping, suspending all disbelief, and synergy with our being, synapses fire in 3 then. Sectors tested, fragments in one direction. Celestial noise detected, delirium unsuspected. Static tuned into reason, time in the ether deepens. Transmissions blink uncompleted. 7, 2, 3, 2, 3.
Sonic boom, rings loud from the engines. Ironclad murder gonna eliminate the distance. Ain't no land that's gonna take us. Cold dust in the fluster, the super cali-effantageous. Slow down, taking no hits. Stellar rating passes, blasters fit to transmit. Sudden to the father, to the maker's own way. There's a method to the metal on the metal highway. Keeping up the pace, keeping with the quickness. Keep the lightning bottle, throttle to the finish. Got nothing to prove, and pushing all your buttons with a button pushing blue hand. Blue blazes, blue faces, blue blood, blue truth. Gonna see you black and blue. keeping up the pace, cruising with the quickness, keep the lightning bottle, throttle to the finish. 30,000 goblins gonna solve the goblins' problems, cause the problems of the goblins going right until they solve them. Yeah, the 30,000 goblins gonna solve the goblins' problems with the stone smashing, bashing, whacking, cracking, smacking, kind of chaos. C to the L to the E, X, enter. Gobby's gonna rise up, boom like thunder. Like thunder, rise up, and raise the iron roof off. Rise up and riot till the bomb drops. Rise up, the time is right to sound off. So rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise up. Rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise up. Rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise with me. Step back, the blues about to pull you under. L to the E, X, enter. Gobby's gonna rise up, boom like thunder. A to the L to the E, X, enter. Gobby's gonna rise up, boom like thunder. A to the L to the E, X, enter. Gobby's gonna rise up, boom like thunder. A to the L to the E, X, enter. Gobby's gonna rise up, boom like thunder. Tongue flaps and jingly shines, quick thinks and gobby minds. Bow down to the new god, Alexander. Rise up and raise the iron roof off. Now rise up and riot till the bomb drops. Now rise up, the time is right to sound off. So rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise up. Rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise up. Rise with me, rise with me, rise with me, rise with me. With me, rise with me.
drifting tender, comrade, heroes ride. Her gallant severed away with the tide. The storm head gathers, comrade, heroes ride. Illusions scattered away with the tide. Why do weathered warriors wander their way where the wanting wonders wait? Hark the herald's anchors away. Here there happens mine escape. Freedom forgone, sinking abyss, comets crumble, Phoebus fades under cosmic clamor decay. Hides a path untaken. Ancient echoes come right, heroes ride. In deafening silence, we'll away with tide. A wave of hazard come right, heroes ride. A whirling windward away with the tide. Stellar stories, starward bestrewn, slipping sidewise, see their snakes. Twixt the leaves you'll find autumn's missing gods and crossing fades. Freedom surging, shifting ahead, comets dancing in her way. To the cosmic clarions accord, along the path not taken. Try, dead, tread on the road that is borrowed design. Through the sound of their signs do they seek tomorrow. Tonight, witness them as the end shall begin. What was final, their lives floating back, further back, ever back to burn, to come on. Come ride, heroes ride, ride with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, so far from home, away with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, so far from home, away with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, to my final escape. Come ride, heroes ride, ride with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, so far from home, away with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, so far from home, away with the tide. Come ride, heroes ride, to my final escape. Staring at death, I take a breath. There's nothing left, now close my eyes for one last time and say goodbye. Lying naked while the snow falls all around me. Drifting closer to the edge, but she won't have me. Wake up and sweat, full of regret. Try to forget these memories lurking beneath, lost in a dream. Unchosen paths, a broken past, forspoken wrath. The pain won't cease. I'll find no peace, no sweet release. Fragile creatures, we are taught to fear the reaper. Ever running, we are dead before we meet her. These voices telling me let it go. I try and try, but can't say no. This endless nightmare has just begun. My heart is dragging me down into oblivion.
Ein brings shadow, one brings light. Two-tone echoes tumbling through time. Free stories fit and cast aside. For knowing no end in sight. One brings shadow, one brings light. Two-tone echoes tumbling through time. Free stories fit and cast aside. For knowing no end in sight. All our splendor beat like in silence. Our surrender rests on reverie. Slowly drifting down into twilight. Left to sifting through fading memories. Know our places for what is wordless. Evanescent, this writing on the wall. Rather stay this descent to madness. Come and save us, catch us before we fall. Riding home, riding home, riding home. Don't lose hope. Like broken angels, wingless, cast from heaven's gates. We only fly when falling, falling far from grace. Our lives a message in a bottle cast to sea. Quick to their ends, our candles burn until we're free. In the rain to line and darkness fade, yes, time circles endlessly. All things change, drawn to the flame, to rise from the ashes to begin. We first must see the end. One brings shadow, one brings light. Two-tone echoes tumbling through time. We score wasted, ten cast aside. For no end inside. One brings shadow, one brings light. Two-tone echoes tumbling through time. We score wasted, ten cast aside. For no end inside. Rock of ages, we cast the first stone. In our cages, we know now what we need. Deep inside, we're nothing more than science and sinners. In the rain, to light and darkness fade. Yes, time circles endlessly. The hands of fate train ahead, right to the edge. All things change, drawn to the flame, to rise from the ashes. To begin, we
you will not stray. Forge ahead to the end we make. Every step we take echoes in our wake, winding round our fate to forge ahead. Should we lose our way? Tire all this pain, we won't be afraid to forge ahead. Fearless hearts ablaze, no more time to waste. No, it's not too late, though a fleeting moment has gone. To forge ahead. As we ride again, as you turn your eyes to the stars, another end. Where it all begins, my chorus guiding you. Forge ahead. Tales of loss and fire and faith, every word on our hearts engraved. In the dark you will not stray.
Good morning and welcome everyone to Lorelines, episode 120. We are here with Synodic Scribe today. How are you today?
I'm doing right. How about the rest of you? I got my coffee right here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I just
Oh,
finished
lucky
mine.
you. I don't have that yet. I haven't gotten that far today yet.
I have a monster here, so
So today we are talking Dawntrail with Synodic Scribe. We're going to be talking about canon, what's not, and some of the more interesting takes that we've seen in the story regarding what happened and what didn't happen. I have seen some amazing hot takes, and I'm sure you have as well, Synodic.
Oh, wow. I will say that it does amaze me how confidently incorrect a lot of people are getting these days.
I think they've always been incorrect. It's just been glaringly blatant this time.
Oh no, yeah, there's always been like one or two comments in some of my videos where someone will leave an essay trying to correct me on something, and I'll be reading it over like, well, that's what?
Yeah.
And then, but it's happening more and more frequently instead of less frequently.
Yes. And I'm not sure if it's because of newer players or if people are just I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from. Anyway, we will get into that in a little bit. I just wanted to see, what has everyone been up to? Aeneas, welcome back. I know you were at DragonCon last week.
I sure was. If you saw a Gabbro herding drunk people back to hotel rooms or handing out ribbons, as well as Asahi in a Hooters outfit sprinting around at one point in time, that was me. Sorry that you had to see that, or congrats on experiencing it, whichever is more applicable.
If you had fun, I had fun too. If you didn't, I'm so sorry.
I had a blast. This is the best con I've ever done.
Amazing. Meowth, what have you been up to?
Me, doing as usual your deep lore dives that have been frying my mind for the past 3 months. Latest dive I did was artifact gear etymology and all that. That was yesterday.
Love it.
Lots of real interesting stuff. Been since the heat's receding here a bit here in Spain, I went back to doing a bit of proper concept art. pull up 2 new pieces for what I stuff. It's basically speculation in form of in visual format, I suppose. So yeah, that's that concept art of the 8th Umbral era that show you the other day. That one, and another one.
That was a really nice
so
artwork. I really liked that one. But we're already getting questions in chat for you, Synodic. Professor, how do you feel about the idea of a reflection hopping storyline?
That's tough because, as the lore is already explained, the reflections are not necessarily in sync with the source 100% of the time. In fact, the only reason we're in sync with it is because it just so happens to be that time to be in sync temporally. The story even said that if given time, that synchronization will falter and they'll fall out of sync again. So the idea of having suddenly all the reflections synced up and us just hopping between each of them willy-nilly, on paper that sounds like fun, but with the lore as written at the moment, that seems a little messy. They would have to introduce some novel concepts to make it work, that's for sure.
my personal hey Ayumi, while
It's too
Ayumi
early for this.
F. No, but if I may address Synodic's statement, maybe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I was asking for permission. But no, but basically my answer to that would be I shared this with the crew as before, but I do believe the whole thing about the reflection is a massive red herring. If we're going into reflections, it's going to be after the story arc, like kind of this. There's supposed to be 3 expansions: Dawntrail, the next one, and the last one. That's the idea. I don't know if they're going to add more. Who knows? But the idea that we know that's there are going to be 3. So I believe the shards. My guess is that there would be nuances, but they're going to be saving that possibility for later, not this arc.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I don't know either. I don't know either.
I do think that is a good segue to go into what the difference is between canon and developer lore, though. And I know, Synodic, you and I are very much on the same page on this. So
I kind of laughed when some of you were cheering my name after that video I talked about it in.
I have railed against people taking developer lore as canonical, particularly when there are instances when the game completely contradicts what the developers are saying. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. More than happy to. So, personally, like, when I try to determine what's canon and what's not, it's pretty cut and dry to me. Anything that happens in the MSQ, the united player experience is undisputed canon. Like, this is something that all players, regardless of how many side quests or job quests you do, you're going to experience this. These events are happening, will happen, and have always happened. Period. Now, of course, do other options become available to you the more side content you do? Yeah. But I would argue that the fact that the MSQ acknowledges you did these events asserts that they are also canon events. That, in a way, it helps to straighten things out because it makes sure that not every side quest or side thing is available or matters, mostly because when you're writing for an MMO of this size, there's not just one person slaving behind a desk writing for every quest, character box, and whatever. You have a team. Of course, you have a lead writer and all of that, but you have people like you have the big person working on the MSQ. You have other writers working on side quests, job quests, stuff like that, etc. And by focusing strictly on the MSQ and what the MSQ acknowledges as real, you kind of allow some leeway for the other writers who may not be as experienced or know the world of Final Fantasy XIV as well to flub up now and then, which they have.
Yes.
and which is okay, which is fine. Like, it happens. But I personally stick to the MSQ. If the MSQ or MSQ adjacent material, like the Encyclopedia Eorzea's or the official story publications on their official website, never bring something up, I do not accept it as canon material. Simple. Like, if it's not brought up in the MSQ books or publications, I don't even consider it as being something worth looking at, because if it mattered, it would have been brought up at some point. Someone somewhere would have talked about it if it was truly consequential. And it reminds me of a story that I was told by Croatoan a long time ago. And this one actually kind of made me a little mad. Everyone any lore person for Final Fantasy XIV knows Anonymous, right?
Yep.
We all know Anonymous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, we all know Anonymous. And I remember a while back, Croatoan said that people were arguing with him about whether or not the Knights of the Round, the knights serving, or the Heavens Ward, serving under Magic Pope, was were they tempered or not? And Anonymous accurately stated that there's no evidence suggesting that they're tempered. The story never brings it up, never shows it, never highlights it or anything. Like, at no point do we think that they're tempered because the story never alludes to it or says it. And that's accurate. He is correct by saying that. Nothing ever points to it. However, at some point, I don't know if it was Oda or another person on the 14 staff, said, like, oh, they're a little tempered. And suddenly, this person and all those other, like, the people on their side of the argument started throwing Anonymous under the bus, apparently. Mm-hmm. Just completely writing over him and ignoring all the evidence and statements and citations he used. And I'm sitting here going, like, no. A developer cannot come in and just say something is true without any evidence being in their product. That completely throws everything that they've worked on out the window. You can't just retroactively change your own script after. That's like, imagine someone releases a movie, right? And then, like, puts an addendum in, like, a trailer on TV saying, like, well, this was supposed to mean that. Like, no. No.
Yeah,
like,
that's not how
if
that
you
works.
actually had any artistic talent, you would have put this, if that mattered, you would have put that information in the story where it belongs. The fact that you didn't tells me that, no, they weren't tempered. In fact, it doesn't matter if they were tempered or not, because you didn't talk about it.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that many years ago, I was actually watching Lore Runner go through Final Fantasy 15. And at the end of the game, he said, you know, the writer's intent doesn't matter. If it's not in the material and that's not how the story is built, it doesn't matter what the writer's intention was. That's what's canon, and that's what it is.
Oh,
So-
death of the author?
Yeah. So if
But real.
yeah, exactly. So if, you know, you're absolutely right. There's no evidence in any material in the MSQ, in the books, in the short stories of the Heavens Word being tempered, and Oda coming out and saying it after the fact doesn't mean anything. That's great that he thinks that, but if it was relevant in any way, it should have been included.
And honestly, you have stuff like that happening all the time with, like, the live letters or interviews and stuff. Like, all of you probably are well aware of the fact that we like to debate and theorize, especially with what would the ancients, for example, what would their lives or civilization have been like if Hermes didn't stab everyone in the back? Like, what would that have been like? How would their society move forward? Everyone, and I mean like the majority of people, believe that, oh, they would have ended up just like the
Plenty.
what's their
The
name?
Ala people.
Yeah.
The Amaru or something.
Nibiru.
Nibiru.
Yes,
Yes. Thank you. That the ancients, oh, they would have ended up like the Nibiru because Ishikawa said so.
No.
And I went back to
Bullshit.
look up exactly what she said, and she said she personally thinks they might have ended up like the Nibiru. Not that they would, not that they did, only that she thinks they might have. And I'm like, that's not good enough. You can't say that this would definitely happen on a hunch. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's also one of those things where I feel like when you get such a dense story in a video game, a lot of people forget that because it's a video game, your interaction with it is also a critical part of the story at any given point in time. So there has to be room for interpretation. That's part of the fun of it, is personal interpretation. And I love bringing this up in terms of the ancients, right? Because Cobb has heard me talk about this a million times. But Asm is like explicitly vague for the sake of you're supposed to come up with your own ideas of them because they used to be you. Like, leaving those gaps is also good writing. Like, it's fun to speculate. And that's also kind of how I take some of the live letters and stuff, is a lot of that is like, oh, here's this thought that we had that doesn't make it canon, but it is fun to kind of speculate on the what ifs, and maybe it'll be something they put in later. But at the point in time, like, the story that you're engaging with is in the video game itself, and that missing component of you are also an active player and multiple people can interpret things differently, at least on the subjective stuff. With the whole thing where people are like, this is explicitly what happened in the story, and that's not at all what happened in the story, that's a whole different ballgame, right? But like, by necessity of it being a video game, there is certain like subjective interpretation that the player also has to engage with, right? It's more of a dialogue than just reading a book.
I completely agree, and especially like when you're writing for an MMO where you have different like lead writers over the MMO's lifetime, they can't afford to have a strict narrative because at some point different writers are going to have different thoughts and interpretations. There has to be that open-ended part to some places.
Right,
there has
exactly.
to be that flexibility. For that, the narrative needs that flexibility. Otherwise, all it takes is one writer flubbing up to completely throw everything into question. Kind of like how they did with the Echo and Blessing of Light and Endwalker. Ishikawa.
I think this is something we're going to experience in this new story arc. Like we ended the whole thing about the previous arc, and this new story arc. I think we were commenting this the other day that it's kind of shaping up to not be completely new, but more like a sequel to the first arc. And that's quite interesting that they changed the writing team, because from what I've been. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but what I've been from going into the threads that Dawntrail has been dangling in my face. I do believe that we're going to experience a change in I don't know how to describe it. Let's call it a paradigm shift.
Really?
Yes.
You would. Okay.
Oh, 13. This again.
I didn't no, honestly I didn't know what was the best way to express it, and that's the most familiar to me. But yes, I do believe we're going to face a change in perspective, if you prefer that.
goes straight to paradigm shift. Okay.
Yeah. So, question in the chat. Question for everyone. What is our honest and constructive opinion of Wuk Lamat?
Oh, the
I'm tired of
proverbial
hearing.
elephant in the room.
Yeah, so here's my thing on this. Please just give me a second on it. There's no issue. I wish people would stop asking me about this on lore podcasts. Because if you don't like her, great. You're allowed to not like a character. That does not mean that's the correct opinion that everyone is holding. I have no notes because she's brilliantly written. And if you don't like her, that's okay. But I am tired of asking for constructive criticism on that. I'm so tired of hearing it.
I've never actually given my official statement on Wuk Lamat, mostly because I don't want the 14 community to try and lynch me again.
Oh, that's a mood.
my official one is she did her best job, and I had no issue with it. I don't take issue with the voice actor. I don't take issue with the writing team. If there were problems with the story itself or with the writing itself, then I would blame it on the voice direction. Because I did feel that there were some points that the voice direction not only lacked or was weak, but could have been better. And it was not pointed in the way of Wuk Lamat. It wasn't, specifically pointed at one specific person. It was generally there were some points that were weaker than others, but we can't place one character to blame for the whole thing. If you did not have if you did not have a good experience with this expansion and you want someone to blame, it shouldn't be her.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that Dawntrail's issues can be laid at the feet of Wuk Lamat. I enjoyed Wuk Lamat a lot. I liked her character. I liked how she was written. I liked how she was voice acted. My only complaint with Wuk Lamat was I wish they had done a little more work on her background. That's pretty much it.
As for me, I didn't see any. I mean, I never understood the problem with Lamat. I think she's a good character, perhaps not to everyone's taste, but she's meant. I mean, I also don't really take any issue with her because I know that she is basically a transitory character, meaning that she's here for Dawntrail and she's not going to be crucial to the story onwards. She's meant to play a role the same way Arenville did, the same way Kwana in a sense did, Zoralja. They're not meant to stay. They're meant to be this bridge to transition. So in that, when people say no, but I'm worried because I didn't like Lamat, so I don't want to. I don't expect her or any of the Turali crew to stick for a long time. Perhaps this is my perception. I don't know, you guys, if you agree with me or not. But regardless of that point, I didn't have any issue with her character. She's meant to be this naive person that has to grow up, and she fails, and she has some good moments. She felt to me authentic. Perhaps it could have been directed better or approached her storyline a bit better. I don't know. I'm not a writer, so I can only tell. I can only tell what I got from her. I laugh at some of her scenes. Sometimes sometimes I would roll my eyes at being Lamat, you being so naive here, and sometimes I would be like, you're being growing up. I think she was fairly solid. I mean, perhaps not my favorite, but I wouldn't say she was badly written. It could have been better directed. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the expert here, so I can only say my perception of her, and it was positive. I mean, not my favorite, but positive. That's all I can say.
I'm a big consumer of Eastern media too, and so I get to see all of what Japan portrays as kind of these characters. And by Eastern media, I do mean anime, but I also mean shows over there, like actual live shows for characters. Like, so I wouldn't know the term for soap opera. Let's just say J drama. There we go. So I get to see their portrayal of these kind of Wuk Lamat characters. So, in a sense, I don't think people are used to seeing these types of characters from a Western to Eastern standpoint, and they're confused about what their point is or what their whole stance or role is in the overarching story. And I agree with Meowth. It's a transitory character type thing where you're going to see her maybe for a while, and then she'll kind of stay in the background a little bit. We're going back to a Realm Reborn type situation here, where we'll be introduced to characters. Heck, let's use Lisa as an example, or even some other random character that we've come across, who gave us a quest line or two, stuck around for 1 or 2 expansions, and then was just a person that we saw every once in a while, had to come back to for a side quest once in a while.
Or got
Something
impaled
like
on a bridge. Either one.
that. Something like that. Yeah.
Yugiri is one of the examples that is coming to mind.
Another example. You talk to them for a little bit, their voice for a little bit, and then they kind of just move on. But people are treating this as okay, they're going to be sticking with us for the long haul. This is our new main character. Oh.
Synodic?
I think I'm prepared to give my official statement.
All right.
And I'll just point to anyone asks, I'll just point to this podcast. So let me start out by saying, well, I feel like since this is the internet, I have to start with this opening statement. I don't care who voice acts what character in Final Fantasy XIV. I am a lore tuber. The written word is all that matters to me. Whether I like a character or not has everything to do with how they're written, portrayed, and used within the narrative of Final Fantasy XIV. So, I'm just going to put that out there right now. And my official opinion on Wuk Lamat comes in 2 phases. And it has to do with the starting arc and the second arc of the Dawntrail expansion. The first arc, which of course I call the Rite of Succession, because the first half of the story has everything to do with becoming Dawn Servant, exploring Tyrol, getting to know its people, etc. I have no real notes on Wuk Lamat. She's written as the character she's meant to be in the Succession arc. She's naive, she grows, she learns, she gains some self-confidence, and essentially tries to grow into her position that she's meant to fill at some point. And I have no problem with that. In fact, I ended up liking her more than I thought I would in the first half because of that. Because I'm like, oh, okay, you didn't do a bad job with her. Nice, that's awesome. Of course, then things start to get messy in the second half with the Solution 9 arc. And I hate to be a negative Nancy, but I had a feeling that this would happen. Ever since the Solution 9 stuff was advertised, I'm like, ooh, they're gonna have a hard time selling that from a lore standpoint. But I'll get into that another time, though. But I think the problem with my problem with Wuk Lamat in the second half is that it's very obvious that the writers were going out of their way to shove her back into major MSQ moments. They were having to justify certain actions, thoughts, and feelings just to push her back into the MSQ, to put her back to your side, and essentially put the spotlight on her again and again and again, even when it wasn't necessary. When she shouldn't have been the spotlight, she was. And I think that's what started to rub people the wrong way, because I know myself and my entire FC did, but apparently a lot of people rolled their eyes during the final fight with Sphene when, the final climactic moment's about to happen and you're about to do the final blow. Out of nowhere, Wuk Lamat bursts in to do the special, I've got you, let's finish this bit.
Pulls a Thancred
But she pulls a
or a Xenos.
a Xenos or a Gaia or Ensinger, like whatever you want to call it. That's the point. I think a lot of people had trouble with it because it's like, why is she here? There's no, and then of course she starts monologuing about, I feel your pain as if it were my own. No, you don't. You just met this person. She tried to kill you and everyone you love. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah,
the
that's
entire
an entirely
speech,
fair opinion. Yeah.
the entire speech starts to fall apart because we've not had enough time with Sphene for you to feel this way. Like,
You know,
and that, I think, is the problem with the second half of the story. People were fine. Most of the people were fine with Wuk Lamat in the first half, and they got exhausted with her presence in the second half because the writers kept shoving her into the story where she didn't need to be.
you know, my impression now that you mentioned that first it could be intentional, but this is kind of like a vibe. It's kind of like a vibe. It could be intentional as to where the story may be going. Now that you mention the why of it, but also there's something quite interesting in the second arc, the Solution 9 arc, because it's not so much Lamat's arc, but Erenville's. The whole thing about Solution 9 and Yasulani, it's actually a conflict for Erenville, not Lamat. Lamat's basically only conflict left in Solution 9 is Soralja, and by the end of the end of the second trial, that's over. But she kind of gets showhorn a bit into living memory. But the actual conflict is Erenville. The problem is perhaps that Erenville doesn't have any combat abilities, and there's the excuse of needing a tank. So I suppose it could be
You're totally right about that. No, and that's the thing. I feel a lot of players of Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail felt robbed of certain character interactions because of those narrative choices. Take Kryl, for example. This was supposed to be an expansion where she took a greater front row seat within the narrative, right? And then what happens? Her earring was hinted at as being important all the way back in Endwalker. And what happens? Well, we learned what the earring is. It was essentially a USB or whatever. And we need it to get to living memory. It's like, okay, that's cool. I love that. But instead of making this a moment about Kryl and kind of paying off all that build-up for her, we give it to this new character that was literally just introduced a few cutscenes ago. And he has to do it. Well, now you've robbed the character everyone was looking forward to of the agency they were meant to have. Yep. Like, for no good reason, no visible reason, at least. Like, and that's a lot of the writing in the second half. You have a whole lot of character moments that should have been dedicated to other people. Moments with Wuk Lamat, as Miatha said, should have been dedicated to Erenville. Moments with Golulja should have been dedicated to Kryl, and so on and so forth. I don't know why they kept pushing moving the spotlight back on the characters that didn't need it. Because especially if the entire first half of the expansion was like meant for characters like Wuk Lamat, you've already given her story arc, you've given her progress. She doesn't need more. In fact, they should have taken that time, that extra screen time, to develop other people that haven't had as much yet.
And I didn't have a huge issue with Wuk Lamat. I did have a huge issue with how the Scions were handled. I felt like there wasn't really any reason for a particular person to be there, with the exception of maybe Grahatia. Everyone else, I feel like they could have just inserted anyone else, and it would have been fine.
That also kind of goes to the Kryl thing for me, because we have Y'shtola show up right around the reveal that Kryl is originally from another shard, and they don't have any sort of interaction about hey, is something up with my soul? Because that's usually the first fear, especially when souls are being used as fuel, like they were in Dawntrail, right? So there were places where it would have made more sense for characters to show up and things that they could have been doing that made more sense, versus how they were actually used. Like, the cameos are fine, right? It's a Final Fantasy game. We all want to see our faves. But as far as like they could have been doing more, but that might also just be in character frustration of I have questions and I want them answered now.
I have given up on the writers taking the Power of Sundered Souls seriously at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Like-
fair. I'm still holding out hope. I'll
They-
carry the beacon.
they have I've lost all confidence that they even know what they're doing when it comes to the strength. They've gone, for those that don't know what I'm talking about.
I do, and I agree.
Those in the audience that don't know what I'm talking about, then when the star was sundered into the source and its 13 reflections, everything upon it was sundered as well, souls included. That means every soul was now 1/14th its original etheric density, which is significantly less powerful. That's why Hades, or Emmett Selk, goes on his speech about how reduced everyone is and how weak everyone has become. And he proves it. Even being 7-8 times rejoined, as the Warrior of Light is in Shadowbringers, they're still not able to 1v1 Emmett because he is a fully unsundered entity. He is at his max power. Meanwhile, you're at like half power. Like, of course, there's a big difference. The problem here is that if Cryo was born on a reflection, she would have gotten a soul from that reflection, which would have been 1/13th or 1/14th its original etheric density. So she should not be this powerful at all.
Yep.
And of course, it just feels like the writers don't even care. They're not even trying to keep that straight anymore, so I don't care either.
It's,
I mean,
it's so frustrating because they addressed it in Pandemonium with Eric Thonius, because his father had given him that crystal focus inscribed with the sigil from the words of Lahat Brea, right? He's like, they talk about how he wasn't able to do a lot of great magic, and the reason that we find that, not magic, sorry, creation magic, have to specify. And then we get to the point where they figure out why that's happening is because Athena has been messing with his soul the entire time. So we have that link of messing with the soul can reduce like your capacity to create things, your capacity for power. And they address it. And that they just didn't do that with Kryl in Dawntrail.
I mean, there's one throwaway line between cutscenes where if you talk to Kryl, where she says, "Oh, but wouldn't have Ashtola noticed if my soul were less etherically dense?" And
Right, but
there's
she didn't
no
comment
follow-up.
on it.
Nothing.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part.
So
like, they're acknowledging it without
acknowledging
doing shit.
that it's a problem in the narrative, and then they do that.
Yeah.
Gee, this is why I don't touch it.
Yep.
But
And-
to be entirely fair, we're still in not patch content, so there's still
That's-
room for them to go into what the hell
Yeah,
is
but I
going
want
on.
my I want my answers now, Meowth.
Yeah, but
I
here's
want my answers now.
here's my issue.
No. Here's what's gonna happen. It's instead of talking about Kryl, the story's just gonna pivot to Galulja, like in the base MSQ.
Oh
So
no.
Here's my issue with the whole Sundered Soul things, and Synodic's absolutely right. So during that cutscene when Emmett is talking about how, people were reduced, they're 1/14th of what they were, their strength, their intelligence, all of that is a 14th of what it was. And if we look at the source, where we are 8/14ths rejoined, and we look at the architecture, the systems of government, the way the society is structured, and then we go to the first, where it's 1/14th, we should not be seeing an equivalent state of society. We should be seeing people living in damn huts, being hunter-gatherers.
We should see the Middle Ages at best.
Yes, agreed. And it's just something that bothered me. And they briefly touched on it during the mage role quests, where they were talking about how it was so hard for a mage to open up a portal to the void, and on the source, any idiot could do it. And that's the only time they ever address it. And it bothered me so much. And now that I finally thought that they were going to start to address it, it just kind of veers off into nothing.
In Tender Valley, it's also discussed how apparently there's a difference in intelligence and ingenuity from the people of the source and the shards. It's also brought back in Dawntrail.
Yeah. But then
There's also like, I promise this isn't me just trying to explain stuff away, but there is a certain element of like people can be wrong in the context of all of the characters are also still figuring out things about the world. So it could be that like rejoinings don't work the way that we thought they did, or something along those lines as well. But that also gets back into the discussion of what is canon versus what isn't canon, and right now we have to treat what we know as canon, otherwise everything else falls out of the window.
Yeah. I will say that, yeah, faulty narrator, exactly. So not faulty narrator, but unreliable narrator. And the Encyclopedia Eorzeas are subject to this as well, because they are written from the perspective of a Charlian scholar. So things that we have...
Except for the third book, which is cited as being written by the Scions.
Yeah. So it is definitely... This is what we know as of this point. And I think the first lore book is a great example of this, where we talk about how etheric properties work, how, what happened before the first Umbral Calamity. And, oh yes, it was a time of gods. And it was rampant creation. Which, not wrong, but lacking a lot of detail.
I have seen that... I personally, now it's nothing against all of you, I personally have a bit of a vendetta against that perspective myself. The idea of, it's unreliable narrator, simply because every time I try to write a lore video and cite my sources and try to be thorough, that's the excuse that's used to try and discredit me in every video.
Oh, yeah,
Every time I write a script, people are all like, well, the books aren't reliable, so we can't use that. It's like, then, so what? I shouldn't make more content then?
So sorry, I totally didn't mean for it to come across that way, because that shit is so annoying, but it is one of those things where, like, if used correctly, it's a good writing element, like in the example of learning more about the Aetheric properties. That's not to say that you shouldn't trust, like, absolutely nothing that comes out of anyone's mouth, or anything that's written down, because otherwise we wouldn't have a game at all.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have any lore. Like,
right, we'd have nothing. Yeah.
If we can't trust anything, then we can't use anything.
Exactly. This is a rare situation case, not like the standard. It's the exception that proves that there is a canon.
When it comes to the Souls thing, though, like, since we got the entire explanation from Emmett Selk, who's been around for more than 12,000 years and has had the time to research the aftermath of what Heidelin did, I'm more willing to believe him than anyone else.
Right.
Yeah. Sure, he might be a bad guy, but I trust that he's not lying about it.
Yeah. And he didn't use lies as a weapon. He used the truth as a weapon.
Exactly. He tried to...
never lied, yeah.
He weaponized the truth in Shadowbringers. So when he says or explains the Sundered Souls and how the reflections work, I believe him, like, wholeheartedly.
It's more the way that Graha and Y'shtola ran with it that I kind of squint some eyebrows at sometimes. But that's a personal situation. I have the same opinions of Graha that you have about Wuk Lamat, Synodic. That's about where I'll leave it.
Oh, the idea that the story just keeps shoving him into the narrative?
Yeah, I did not.
Don't get me started on that. I will rant.
Here goes me out.
Well, here's the thing. This is what I was saying earlier. You're allowed to not like a character. It's fine. I still respect him, but I don't have to, like, enjoy every moment that he's on screen.
No, I don't respect him. That's the difference between you and me.
I will agree that the writers do very obviously go out of their way to write him into the narrative more often than other characters, but again, that's likely because of favoritism and
right. Again,
community favoritism than anything.
It's a video game. They're still
We're
selling
painting a target on our backs, by the way.
That's fine. I've said this on Mog Talk before. I've received commentary on my Graha opinions in the past. They have not changed.
He's not a
Oh,
poorly written character.
would
The
be-
writers just
I-
obviously shove him into the narrative.
Yeah.
I would be
That's
lynched on the
okay.
street. That's so it's fine.
Yep, Meowth has opinions on Graha. But
Not mean
Very vocal
can of
ones.
worms.
I will say this. I'm fine with the unreliable narrator thing. I do not think it's a valid criticism to criticize the lore until it is either built upon in the game or something changes with the status quo. That is the lore, regardless of what people think or regardless of what other perspective people have. That is a source of the lore for the game. So I don't think that's a valid criticism to levy against someone. That is a valid way of saying this could be retconned in the future or expanded upon in the future. But that's really about it.
It's so the thing about the encyclopedia, or say, we've been having the joke, quote unquote, half joke to be fair, of Charlatan propaganda, which I believe is actually close to the truth, even more so coming down Dawntrail and the addition past expansion of the Unending Codex. That's a whole different kind of worms, but still, even though right now, as of me right now, I'm taking all of that Charlatan quote unquote lore and the Unending Codex lore with much suspicion, especially that stupid codex. I'm taking that with so much suspicion. That doesn't mean that it's not valid to use it as a reference. They give it to you to have the reference, in fact. That's basically your guideline. And then the purpose of it is, if you're in a story, in-game, you realize something contradicts that lore, that's giving you a warning sign as, okay, this is different from what this source says as what's happening in-game. And that's how it should be understood. Like, they give you the guideline, but that doesn't mean that, I don't know if I'm making sense. Like, it's meant for you to be on guard as to what is true and what is not, but that doesn't mean either that you have to blindly believe the encyclopedia or the codex material, or either completely doubt and consider it not a valid source of information, because as of now it's the only source of information. So our job as lore divers is to contrast this information as to what happens in game and what we're given, if it makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of ranted there.
Totally fine. We like the Meowth rants. I do want to segue, and I know we've got a couple of comments in chat. One, just completely off topic, but it's been asked several times now. Which Final Fantasy outfit would you want inside of 14 to have it be a reward for a quest or a store outfit? Just quick wish list.
Oof.
Oh, Final Fantasy what?
What outfit from another Final Fantasy game would you want in 14 that's not currently available? And I immediately know this. I want Celeste's outfit from 6.
For what reason?
I'm not
Just
saying.
for glamour, I suppose.
Yeah, just for glamour.
I was thinking there were some underlying motivations for that, but all right.
Get your mind out of the gutter. Mine is pretty simple. I would want the Kalu jacket from Final Fantasy XI, because I know what I am and I know what I want.
I mean, you might get it.
I'm on my hands and knees praying.
No, we're gonna
I'm-
get carbuncle mitts.
I'm
Yes.
currently going through all of the art books of the Final Fantasies. Thank you for asking me that. This is me going through almost 2.5 decades.
I would like two possible outfits. I would like. One, I would like. I have a soft spot for March's outfit from Tactics Advance, especially but not so much the outfit, but I would like the pizza cutter crystal sword, the judge sword, and And I would like Ramsa's chapter 2-3 armor, not the final chapter armor that we got from the raids, but the actual mercenary armor for Ramsa.
Okay.
Yeah, those would be my picks.
Synodic, any takes?
I'm honestly with the Final Fantasy 11 train. I wouldn't mind seeing more 11
Yes.
outfits and
Yes, you and I are going to become excellent friends.
I will say,
mostly because I have a lot of fond memories of 11, and I wouldn't mind seeing the original Final Fantasy MMO represented in this MMO.
I was so heartbroken. So I've been playing through 11, and I was going to log on Friday, and the free login period ended, and I was like, no, and I was very, very close to re-upping.
Now you have to pay rent.
Yeah, now I gotta pay rent. So I do want to transition into something that I know we had talked about, but some of the, how should I say, more fanciful takes that the community has had on the game that are based just, I don't know on what. And I know a lot of people have complained about Dawntrail in particular not having a lot of voice cutscenes, and people saying, oh, you know, we just skipped everything that's not voiced, because if it's not voiced, it's not important. So what do you guys, what are the most, I guess, creative takes on the MSQ that you've seen?
Okay, so here is my thing, because you guys have heard this multiple times. Do you guys remember the Evilise raids?
No, what's that?
Oh, love those raids. They're great.
Do you... Not everyone liked them, but for those that did, for those that thought they were okay, I ask you, did you sit through the dialogue?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
And do you remember that they weren't voiced either?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I'm used to reading text boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one situation where I thought, okay, that's a perfect example of what an expansion of that could be if you just sat down and read the text boxes, because you will miss substantial lore if you just leave it on in the background and listen instead of reading. Because that's more of a visual than an audio thing. You have to pay attention. You have to process it. It's something that we do, for instance, whenever we find something in the lore, in the screenshots, in the cutscenes that seems out of place. Even when the voice actor says something, we take a screenshot of it. We then go back on it and we kind of ruminate. We think, okay, this may have impacted something elsewhere. If people did stuff like that, did more things like that, instead of just taking the audio as an example or as the concrete evidence, they may not have taken more issue with the Dawntrail story. But again, in the past, not just the Evilise raids, there is still a lot of text that was not voiced. And you can miss a lot of interesting background and story if you do not sit down and pay attention to not only what the text box says, but how the characters' mannerisms are, what all is going on in the cutscene, in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best example of that was in ARR during it's not even a reviewable cutscene, but Urianger tells you about the reflections for the first time in the Waking Sands. And then we got to Heavensward, and they're like, yes, we're from the first, when you meet the Warriors of Darkness. And everyone's like, what? What do you mean? And like it was some kind of surprise.
It's, again, I want to reiterate, too, on the Evilise raids, for those that want to go back and just, point to the, Encyclopedia Eorzea has the information, you could have known all about that before the books came out, just by reading the chat boxes from the Evilise raids, because they went over the entire 4th Astral Era history.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's just my take. I went through Dawntrail, reading all of the text boxes, taking screenshots on any kinds of information that seemed important and was important if I found out later. So I believe if other people did the same, they wouldn't have as much issue with the story as they do now. That's my take.
I just think it's really interesting how people they will have they will absorb the story and then they will insert one or two details that completely change the context of everything. I think one of my favorite comments was on the Living Memory video that we just posted, and before that on the Ultima Thule video, where they said, "Oh, you know, there were because they had used soul ether or whatever or living ether to manifest the people in Living Memory that they all had souls." I was like, "Where'd that come from?"
Huh?
Yeah.
What?
I was like,
I didn't read that one.
there was literally nothing that said that was happening.
Oh,
Literally
Lord.
nothing.
Oh
And
my
and
God.
the same thing with Ultima Thule, where they said, "Oh yeah, Emmett Selke flooded the place with ether. Now it's ether, not madness." And I'm like,
That one was like, what? It was like, no.
Also, that reminds me, there's an entire conversation we could have about the writers using simulated civilizations as the big reveal for 3 expansions in a row.
yeah.
Like, my God, get us some new material. I'm begging you.
Yeah, and not only was it another simulated civilization, but then we had another world-ending dungeon. And I believe this is the 4th one we've had now as a climax. So we had one for Amarot, we had one for the Void patch quests, we've had one for Dawntrail, and I'm missing one. But yeah.
Amarot?
No, Amarot was the first one.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just it felt very recycled.
I do believe there's a purpose, but this is all speculations. So I'm not going to go into there.
Oh, dead ends.
Dead Ends is not so much the apocalypse, it's more like kind of like it's not so much that you see the actual disaster, kind of like second part of Dead Ends because of, well, the whole nukes and all that stuff. But Dead Ends there's a different vibe. It's not like being placed in the heat of the world's ending. It's more like the foregone conclusions, like the dying embers. In a sense.
But it's still the end of a civilization, because at the end of the day, none of the dungeons we experience are actually like anything. It's the memory of the thing that's happening, right? And like there's also nuance to be said of like Amarot was just the end of Amarot, and Living Memory was just the end of a single shard. What's that to the whole universe from last expansion? So when it gets into like the power scaling, I'm not sure that that's a conversation worth having in the context of like writing style, because at the end of the day, it's 3 expansions in a row where the last dungeon has been, we're going through the end of some civilization, right?
Yeah.
Narratively, it's going to lose its impact one way or another, even if the scale does reset. Like, I get what you're saying, Meowth, but like the player experience you're going through it, they mean different things, but you're at the end of the day still doing the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand. It's just as for me, I read the thing as this is a repetition, but with different nuances into each of them. Right. I understand that for us, that's quite interesting, but for the normal player, it feels like a rehash if they're not picking up the difference between each situation.
I mean,
I know what
like
you're
rehash
saying.
To me too.
I mean, gameplay wise, I suppose it does, but I didn't personally. I didn't have that vibe. I suppose I'm a very boring person. I suppose.
That's fair. I'm just, yeah.
Oh my lord. I will say I've never seen more misinformation at the end of an expansion than I have with Dawntrail.
Same.
Yeah.
Like, it is ridiculous how many crack theories and now normally there's always going to be one or two crack theories, right? I think the problem in this case is that you have a lot of people believing them, even though they are factually incorrect. Like for instance, one that blows my mind, aside from the whole argument of are they alive or are they not, is the Malala Lalafell and when they arrived on that reflection, right? You have a lot of people that are under the impression that the Malalans arrived in Alexandria's bubble after it had already detached itself from the reflection, which is impossible.
Who made the electrope then?
Exactly. Exactly. So let me set the record straight for anyone listening. If you think that the Malalans arrived within living memory, that is incorrect. Because living memory was made of electrope, and it was the Malalan Lalafell who ultimately led the field in creating electrope after arriving on the reflection. They can't have arrived at a place that they had a hand in creating. Like, do you see the problem here?
Burying my face in my hands. Oh my God, that is painful.
It's just so, and that this isn't just one person. This is a lot of people believe this.
I've seen it.
It's ridiculous. And I'm sitting here going like, how are you this confidently incorrect?
Oh my.
Trust me, for me managing the social media account on Twitter, you see a lot of takes on social media, whether it's Twitter, whether it's YouTube, whether it's any other type of interacting with the public type account. There are some really bad ones out there. There's some wild ones out there, and there's some ones that kind of bring a thought to your head, and you want to roll with it and see where it goes.
Then there's some of them that they started really well, and then they somehow take a complete tumble and ruins the rest of it. It's like, points for trying, but that you had it in the first half, but second half it went to hell.
Some of ours are like that too, where we start with one and it seems okay, but then it takes a dive later on. So we're not immune from that either. I mean, everyone can make a theory, everyone can make a kind of shot at the lore coming up in the future, but not everyone is going to get it right. That's the beauty of throwing like red herrings out there to misdirect.
There's also something to be said for just blatantly ignoring what you've been given, because at that point it's no longer speculation, it's creating your story, which is fine, but that's not lore speculation, that's fan fiction, and I would like to read it in that context.
Fan fiction, that's another thing I want to touch on. So,
oh God, I keep opening the cans of worms. I keep accidentally touching all of the things we're not supposed to be this evening.
So I am, for all the people that do know me in the game, I do RP. I do write stories for my character. Those who have taken the story thus far, throughout the expansions, throughout the base game, and crafted a story of their own, I see some people who have kind of gone off the rails about it, who have taken, oh, well, this character has moved on, or, oh, this character is related to my character in such a way that it completely goes against the narrative of the story. And I'm like, well, if you were to do that, you would have to completely change your character's origins, who they interacted with. You would have to completely redo the story. And then they could shoot back with, oh no, it's my story. It's my interpretation of the story. It's me. And that's where I come in with it. They took Yoshi P's answer about what the story means to them, or what a facet of the story is, whether it's canon or not, and ran with it. And types of fan fiction that wants to write themselves into the story and the person writing them doesn't want this to happen because it goes against what did happen, it frustrates me because I know that they want to be right, but that's not how our story is going to go.
I will say we're getting into the realm of like personal canon here for your original characters. It can't be treated the same way that you treat
can't.
like the same part of the story, if that makes sense, because it is like it's your character, right? You're gonna want things, and there's always
I've seen
like,
creative things like, okay, well, my character saved Yatsuyu from dying and created a branch in a timeline. That's cool. That's a cool
right,
thing.
but you can't treat like RP and fan fiction as like everyone should believe that about everybody's characters at all times. It's just creative writing.
It is.
Yeah.
I've seen that so often. Like, this is one of the reasons the culture of shipping is one of the things I loathe the most in this life.
Shipping.
But no, I hate it. Like, it's the bane of my existence as a lore diver. Because people just
I'm a
won't
fan of
accept.
Fire Emblem. What are you talking about?
Fire Emblem treats it differently because in Fire Emblem you can basically shag whoever you want, and that will be canon.
The original multiverse.
It's
Oh, God.
the original multi shag. So
Meowth knows what I'm talking about.
so what that's so it's the bane of my existence as a lore diver because I've had so many run-ins with shippers that you're trying to lore dive, you're trying to establish facts, and sometimes the story does lean into a pairing, so to speak, and they will contradict you because this leaning into contradicts their idea, and it's like, but this is not about your idea. This is about what it is in the story of the game. It's not your story. You can perhaps have your own interpretation, but that doesn't mean that your interpretation is the interpretation.
Correct.
It makes sense. So when you're lore diving, you have to separate yourself from subjectivity and be like, this is what happens. And if there's an intention, you have to write it down, regardless of what other people or you yourself may think. It's an exercise in objectivity, and admittedly, it's difficult because everyone inevitably is going to be there's going to be a personal bias, but it's an exercise.
See, this is why you stick to the written word. Like, don't.
Exactly.
There's no room for personal takes or opinions. It's what was said, when was it said,
Right.
and how does it relate to everything else. I mean,
So no, but yeah, I have so many run-ins, and I had the worst of them, like back in 2010. But it's been going back after. I don't know what's going on in the 14 fandom. That lately, when I've been trying to expose some analysis, I've been having run-ins with shippers that are like, no, and it's like,
here's the thing is, like, the way that y'all hear, and I'm saying this, I'm gonna try to explain this in a way that makes sense. The way that y'all write is not the way that people who are writing in that context are writing Meowth. You're having two entirely different conversations because they don't care about the canon, they care about their character. And that's okay.
Fair.
Right.
Fair.
So you're trying to have a conversation with them that they don't want to have because it's not what they're talking about. And the same thing is happening to you where you want to talk about something else and they're fundamentally different things. So it's not lore related. They're not trying to overwrite canon. They're not being selfish. They're fully just writing their own thing, and it's not related to the lore like as it's written in game at all. And that's the whole point.
You're making it sound like I go to these people's publications.
No, I'm not. And I don't want it to come
Correct.
across
Yeah,
that way.
the bully.
why do you go out of your way to argue with these people?
No,
Wow.
I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm not saying they're doing that to you. I'm saying that you're having two fundamentally different conversations. Same thing with like Ayumi and the RPing. Most people who RP in game, even if it's in character in Eorzea, they don't care because they just want to have a conversation with somebody and pretend that they're not themselves for a little while. It's not a lore analysis. I think that's fundamentally where that line is being drawn, and I think that it has gotten a little blurry in Dawntrail. Specifically because, like, you have more room to write about your own character, and that's fine. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that kind of line between, like, personal canon and actual canon for the sake of, I just realized that they were two different conversations that we were having just now.
Regardless, it's still appropriate to mention because I've seen so many takes as well as people who you try to bring up a theory or a speculation, and they will tell you no, that's impossible, and then you ask them why, and then you're expecting them to answer with a reasoning based on in-game facts, and they instead tell you because I don't like it.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's where it becomes the same conversation again. But it's just the way it was being described to me just now. I'm like, this doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, but I mean, but the developers don't care about what do you like. They're going to make their own story, and they should be making their own story. This is one of the reasons I can't deal with the Catman, because it's like showhorning the fucking Catman in everything. It's like, can you please get him out of my face for one expansion? I was literally so mad when he appeared back in my face for the second half of Dawntrail. I was like, I was living the dream.
Wow, Meowth, trying to write your own fandom without Graha. I see how it is.
Yeah, there you go.
Let me listen. A woman can dream, okay?
I did not mean to open that can of worms. I keep doing this. I just need to shut up and leave.
No. This is good.
No.
But
no, it's important. It's important to bring that up because we're discussing canon and non-canon, and this is one of the sources of so
true.
much problems in the fandom, as people who like us lore dive, and our vision is as objective as
It doesn't
objective
just
as we
exist
can.
in 14, it exists elsewhere too.
Everywhere. It's some fandoms worse than other.
Sometimes it feels like the 14 community doesn't even want lore channels.
that's a mood, yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't look at comments, and that's the way that I protect myself. At this
It's gotten harder for me lately because they'll come into my Discord and be little contrarian
God.
assholes.
Oof. We haven't had
Thinking
that
that they have the answer, right? I mean, I remember when there was just only one or two lore creators on YouTube and in the 14 community. And now there's many, not only us, not only you, but many, many people pumping out lore content. So they're going around and taking content and from all of these other sources and going, okay, this is what I think, this is what I think, this is what you should think too.
People
don't
deal
necessarily-
really bad with different opinions. They don't. It's weird. It's like, don't you get that different opinions can coexist? It's like there's no problem. Like you can have this lore diver say this and this one say this other thing, and be like, I think both are possible. Instead of going to the other lore diver you disagree with, and it's like you should think like this because the other one said so. And it's like,
I've always had like a lot of working theories as to why Final Fantasy XIV lore isn't as popular as the lore in other MMOs. And I think leaning into what you're saying about like roleplay and stuff, I think is one of my theories is that Final Fantasy XIV has become such a single player focused narrative. Like people aren't interested in learning more about the world, its characters, and their interactions because they, in their own mind, they've already decided what those interactions are. And to contradict that is to be incorrect.
Yeah, I think
point.
I think Pyro put it really well, where he came over to 14 from World of Warcraft, where the story is so convoluted it needs lore people to explain what happened because there are so many different outlets for it. And he said that in 14 you don't really need it because the lore is presented so well in game. But now what we're seeing is that even though it's presented well in game, people are not comprehending it, and they're coming away with. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know if it's what it is, but people are not interpreting it, or not so much interpreting it, but they're not digesting it in the way that it is.
I will say there's also something to be said for other MMOs constantly removing parts of their story at any given point in time. WoW is a good example of that. I am a WoW refugee myself. A lot of their expansions just overwrite stuff.
Yeah.
So what we might consider a retcon in 14 in like re-explaining how the rejoinings worked would be them just completely nuking a character and rewriting them again with a completely different story, but it's the same character. And then games like Destiny 2 lore videos are also super popular. And I've never played that game, but I love watching the lore videos. And what I've learned from that is you can't play the game as it existed when all of that is coming out as well. Because it just doesn't
Bungie
exist.
And FOMO.
Right, yeah. It's Bungie and FOMO, but like it's not the only MMO that does variations of that. So a lot of what they're doing lore-wise is like archiving the story itself, which we do see a lot of in 14 as well, but it's not like people need to go back to review that to experience it in the first place, because if I decided today I wanted to play Destiny 2, I would be able to play, 3 storylines at the end of their entire arc? I forget what the number is, right? I would rather watch the 7-hour movie where someone talks about it with such care and depth and love for the story, because I would get more out of it that way, right? And in 14, so much of the experience is personal, like you playing through it, and it's not like you can go back and review like the old quests from ARR that they cut with the boxes, right? I had to do that because I started playing after that was cut. Same thing with like 1.0. So I personally feel like it's just that there is less of a need from it, because the game still exists, by and large, in a way that is entirely understandable and comprehensible.
There's one thing I would say. It's also I realized because Dawntrail is littered with references to Shadowbringers. It's not a rehash of Shadowbringers. It's meant to evoke Shadowbringers for a reason. But I realized, one, that people actually, for all the praise that people give to Shadowbringers, I've seen so many takes that actually make me think, did you actually pay attention to the story of Shadowbringers? Did you retain any memory of Shadowbringers?
No, they
all?
hit the skip button.
And the second one is there's a lot of, especially going into Endwalker and then patch period of Endwalker, that the fandom has created their own fanon. And going back to Shadowbringers myself as to take notes after Dawntrail, I realized there are actually things here that are not stated in anywhere form. It's just a fandom speculation that has grown so popular that as of now it's almost become the fanbase's entire canon, and there's a possibility that this is going to be defied come next arc, and that's going to throw everyone for a loop. So
I'm gonna paint a target on your Mac Meowth. One of the problems is the ancients. People love the idea of the ancients. People love the idea of the origin of civilization. People loved how they were portrayed, that they wanted that whole story to be about them. And so when they was brought back to the present, a lot of people liked the Scions, but they preferred the Ancients.
I mean, I do prefer the Ancients, but that doesn't mean that I don't analyze the Scions or anything like that.
Do they? Because when I roasted Hermes, people made it seem like the Ancients were the worst people ever.
That's true. It's weird. It's so weird.
Like,
it's so
I remember
weird.
when I roasted Hermes, like, you had so many commenters straight up making things up about ancient society just to try to justify Hermes' choices. And I'm sitting here going, like, what are you talking? Like, one person straight up, like, told me with a straight face that ancient society was bad because they were forcing people into roles they didn't want to be in. And I'm like,
Yeah,
Where was
I've
that?
seen
does
that.
it say that?
I
Like, we have examples of them choosing their life paths, of their careers, their choice. Like, Hythlodaeus was offered the position of convocation and turned it down. In fact, he nominated someone else. Like,
It's because they're all hot.
and the 8-man raid with like it was brought up earlier, he wasn't very good with creation magic, and another member of the Words of Lahabre even said, like, hey, do you just want to move to another department? You can, you know. Like, there's multiple examples of the ancients being able to choose their career, choose their lives, and live how they want to live, that it baffles me that someone legitimately thought that the ancients forced people into unhappy roles in life. Like, how do you reach that conclusion? How did you get there?
I'm
I would
so
say,
curious.
I would say one reason that Neil and I have discussed at some point before. Shane, he's not here, but because he has better insights than I would have. But paraphrasing him, I would say that's because Endwalker is meant to present you the narrative of the ancients being questionable. As you go into Elpis and you see the negative side after negative side, quote unquote, after coming from the memory of Amarot from Shadowbringers. But because the narrative of Endwalker is trying to justify Bernard's actions, it's kind of going into this darker side, and people run with it and make it like the ancients had it coming, which is no,
Which is entirely untrue. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it just
I've
blew
seen-
my mind.
I've seen people saying that the ancients were against anything, that the ancients were against individualism, and I was like, no,
they celebrated individualism. Like, the
That was
lore
the whole
says
point.
so.
That was the whole explicit point.
The entire point of their creation magic is to express themselves in unique ways. I mean, hell, you had some ancients that didn't even create with their magic. You had writers, you had musicians, architects. Like, their society was so far along and so dynamic that it puts all the other civilizations in Final Fantasy 14 kind of to shame.
Yeah. No, it really does, and it's like, but the thing is, I've seen these arguments as to trying to stifle Hermes's unhappiness, which I would say Hermes and Athena, they are basically outliers of ancient society. But people are judging the entire ancients by saying this is her Hermes and this is Athena. This is why they have to go, and it's like, no, that's not how it works.
How unfair is it to judge an entire society because of one depressed idiot?
Very. For all the talk I said earlier about how I just don't read comments, I do have interactions at conventions where people come up and try to pitch things to me. And I am reminded that last weekend at Dragon Con, someone came up to me when I was dressed in Fandaniel, like standing in a hotel lobby bar, just having a drink, chilling with my friends, and was like, "Hey, so how excited are you for Xenos to come back?" And I just walked away. I
Oh
took,
God, no,
I took-
please.
I know. I looked at him. I just took my drink and walked to the other side of the lobby. I was like, I'm not having this conversation.
Oh my
They're
god.
probably standing there like, what?
I was like,
Listen,
I'm not here for it.
I enjoyed Xenos in Endwalker, which was one of the few things of Endwalker I actually liked. I think it was fairly well done, but I don't want him back. I think he got his. I think he got his moment of triumph. He got his proper end. We gave him the battle boner he wanted. That's all he needed. That's fine. I like Xenos. That's all we need from him. It's fine. And I like and again I like Xenos. Whereas in other characters I would
Careful, we might
argue
quote
that
you on that.
It's
Too
just
late,
that
it's
thing
already
where, like,
recorded.
Yeah, it's just that thing where it's like, if you like a character, I don't understand why you want them to keep coming back to life. Like, that's the logic that disconnects for me, because a good story is one that ends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I
like,
understand.
it's the amount of times, Xeno specifically, people keep bringing that up to me, and I'm like, man, I don't even like him. I'm just here because I'm gay. Like, you... I'm dead serious. I was like, you think I was like holding hands with a Xenos cosplayer because I liked him? No, I think it's fun that he's gay, and that's it. I just liked that. That was.
But like, for example, I would argue that some characters have not a close arc. Xenos, I would say it's a
Right,
close
but
arc.
that's you and I disagree on that point.
I
too,
know,
yeah.
I know,
Right.
I know.
And that's
But
also
it's
like,
fine
but
to
we-
disagree.
Right, because we're fundamentally agreeing on the basic building blocks. Your theories are just not mine about where the story is going.
That's fine.
This
That's
is a
fine.
healthy discussion.
And we can agree that both personal theories are valuable in their own right.
Correct.
Exactly.
So long as
Correct.
we respect the source material.
Yep.
Correct.
Correct.
Meowth and I have had this conversation many times.
Yeah,
Actually,
but it's fine. It's fine because we keep each other in our tracks. It's fine to have. It's fine to have different points of view because and debate in a civilized whatever way, because it also keeps you on your tracks as to not fall complacent with your own theories. Because, for example, Aeneas, when I say something, Aeneas says, I disagree with this, and I would ask why, and she would tell me basically a reasoning of that, and I would force me to go over my own reasoning and be like, okay, this may be true, and then in some other aspects I would be like, no, I reaffirm my stance because of this, and this. It's an exercise. If we just surround ourselves by an echo chamber, we're not going to make that.
I completely agree with you on that one in ways you have no idea. Because the entire point of theory crafting to me is to judge what we all collectively know and agree on together and compare notes, essentially. Like, maybe we learned something that the other didn't. Maybe we expand our understanding of the narrative. Which is, honestly, is the entire reason I can't stand the people that try to say that the short stories on the website or the books are not canon simply because they're unreliable. Because it kills the argument. It kills the theory crafting. It kills any sort of debate we could have had.
That's unfortunate. I can't wrap my head around that. That's official. Like, that's integrated into the game. Things that happen in the stories are mentioned in the MSQ.
Exactly, and we should have these conversations, like Meowth said, to keep us on our toes, to keep fact-checking, to make sure, did we remember this correctly?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the important thing of lore diving is not so much like, for example, we have, well, I kind of have the unholy file, which is over 250 pages as of now. No. And it's not so much I've drawn my conclusions, but that's not what's important of there. That the thing important in there is the threads and the reasoning. So that's the point of lore diving. Like, we as a whole, the whole team, and you, Synodic, as well, we may have different conclusions from the same thread, but the important part of it is that we see the same thread and we follow it and reason on that. That's the important thing. The conclusions are just almost like superficial. It's not the real, the crucial.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is one I wanted to touch on with Synodic too. The raids, are they canon as part of the MSQ?
I would argue that any raid that is directly referenced by the MSQ did indeed happen. Like, for instance, a lot of side content, a lot of raids and other material, in my personal opinion, was canonized by the MSQ because, of course, at the very end, or when you're about to go to Ultima Thule, all these different people that you've helped over the years come and, like, help you. So you had Alpha and Omega, you had the Sky Pirates, you had the Theater Troupe, like, all of these, which, in my personal opinion, shows that, yes, these things did happen at some point. Now, do we know exactly when in the timeline? Well, not exactly, but they did indeed happen.
I mean,
So would you
before,
consider, let's say, Pandemonium and the Evilise raids, would you consider them canon in the way that they presented characters we may have seen occasionally but still referenced? I mean, Pandemonium is still part of the MSQ technically because of Themis, because of its relevance to Elpis.
Well, that's where I draw the line, honestly. It's interesting you bring that up because, like, that's using the Evilise raids as the other example. The Evilise raids, you do them, and then later on you see the theater troop in the sky during the Endwalker MSQ. At no point in the MSQ so far has anyone referenced the events of Pandemonium happening. Like, no one has acknowledged that that has happened. Which points to me as it being kind of in this lukewarm position at the moment of did it or did it not occur. And personally, I wouldn't mind if it's never brought up again because of how messy the lore gets toward the end of Pandemonium. And you all know exactly where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not the best written raid
So
series.
if you do them, it does indeed appear in the Ethereal Sea.
That is true. It does change the overworld,
Yes.
or quote unquote the instanced overworld area that you access.
It changed the. Are you talking about like when the Pandemonium appears in the dungeon area?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's still isolated within
Right,
the
exactly.
raid. It's not part of the MSQ. No one acknowledges that it's there.
It's also worth pointing out that like there's nothing in it that's like relevant. Like you're talking about Evilise and seeing the theater troupe at the end of Endwalker, right? That took 2 expansions for that to come up. It could just be coming up later, or it might not come up at all at this point
Exactly.
in time,
It could
because
be a
just
thing where it
takes
comes up
time.
later or it comes up never.
Mhm.
But I would always argue that if it is brought up, I would say it's more canon than not. Simply because now the MSQ is directly referencing that, yes, you did help these people, this did occur. The problem with the Pandemonium raids is that since, again, they do a whole lot of time travel nonsense, it's harder to sell its importance because now you're trying to argue the point of would this have happened with or without the Warrior of Light's intervention?
Right.
Because I mean, and that goes all the way back to the paradoxes that Endwalker created with traveling back to Elpis. But
And that's part of the fun of like we're speculating here if it becomes relevant, how it becomes relevant, if
Exactly.
it's relevant at all. Because at the end of the day, it's still a story that I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed the raids. Like it's the same conversation that we have a lot as far as ultimates go, right? Because I'm a lore consultant for fight analysis. Not officially, but for like raid teams. Felt the need to clarify in that moment. And a lot of that stuff is like drawing on like the established canon of like physics that we have in game. We mentioned time travel. DSR is a great example of that. The Omega protocol is a great example of like previous things that have been in the MSQ becoming relevant again for mechanics. Like it's a puzzle mechanic that you have to pay attention to the story to figure out. So there is a certain element of bleed between the two, even if you don't consider the raids canon, and it's still fun to do lore dives on them, even if they aren't
yeah.
like canon to the MSQ itself, right? Because they are still connected. They all are.
It is. It's still fun to theorize, like, for example, what would Athena have been like if she wasn't corrupted by the Heart of Sabik, for example. Like, it's fun to argue, like, how would these events or characters have played out if X or Y was different? And that doesn't invalidate the story that had been told at all.
Exactly.
It simply brings into question, was this important? Like, to the overarching narrative, does this matter?
Yeah. Like, did our going back to Elpis do anything? No, we were just basically an observer.
Is no.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, us going back to Elpis, like, trust me, I went back over that lore multiple times just to see, and I came to the conclusion that no, these events would have happened whether or not the Warrior of Light went back to Elpis, period.
Yeah. We were just observing. And I felt it was the same as Pandemonium. It existed just to give the player closure on La Habrea and Elidibus. I feel like that was it. It wasn't something yet that's relevant in story. And it like you said, it opened up some doors that are pretty glaringly wide open.
It's not great. We can just say it.
Yeah. So I think that yes, there is value in that kind of storytelling, but at the same time, we want also something that has that value, but also drives the narrative forward and adds to our character.
Exactly. And like with the Pandemonium raid, like you said, it helps to explain certain things, and it also helps to explain like La Habrea's perspective and his philosophy, why he became the megalomaniacal madman that we experience in ARR. And we see why, because he was a man of absolutes. He believed that I will do this no matter what the cost.
Right.
And okay, we now know why he went crazy, because, well, he was so focused on the goal, he forgot to see the forest for the trees. Like, and that's fun. That's good to know in hindsight. But does that, knowing that, change the story at all?
No, he's been dead since Heavensward.
He's been dead since Heavensward. It doesn't matter that we know this now. It doesn't matter that we had those final words with Themis, because, well, his character arc had essentially ended after he sent us back in time to Elpis.
And it wasn't even him.
It wasn't him. Well, oh my God. Don't get me started on the whole, like, how she got a hold of his soul.
She didn't.
After it was in the...
She said she just stitched his memories to a blank soul. It wasn't even him.
Exactly. I'm not even going to touch again, Pandemonium wasn't the best written raid. But
it served its purpose, which was a send-off to these characters that had like been with us since the start of the game, and we just did not understand on a level. And I enjoyed it. I got a tattoo based off it, so like.
Oh really?
I know, yeah. So.
Oh, you have to show me sometime. That sounds awesome.
It's literally just a constellation of stars for his last line. For all of the stars that have crossed my path, I am grateful to have met yours, in reference to the soul. So I actually have all of the convocation constellations tattooed around my wrist. And to me, it's a reference to the game, of course, but it's also a reminder that every time I look down of how many people are in my life now because of this game.
That's gorgeous.
I think, however, that in that sense, Themis at the end of the Pandemonium raid could have perfectly served the purpose of the first insight into the Endless, as it's basically a simulacrum of Themis, to which we sort of say our goodbyes, same as La Habrea, but it's not the real one, so to speak. So you could say it's almost a foreshadowing of the thing we experienced with the Endless.
In hindsight, yeah.
I would go even a step further and say that we experienced that with the Shadow of Hythlodaeus and Amarat in Shadowbringers.
Yeah, kind of. But
rather than
that one actually is not so much Hythlodaeus as much as it's kind of a proxy for Hades to speak with us in a sense. Since
he's constructed from Hades' memories, which again argues, is memory enough to consider something alive? And as far as the lore of Final Fantasy XIV is concerned, as far as its own world building is concerned, the answer is no. Memory is not enough to call something alive.
Yep.
No,
like,
in fact,
more than once, the story has gone out of its way to say that unless it has a soul, it's not entirely a person.
In fact, Y'shtola in Shadowbringers says that to her eyes, which is her ether sight, the shades of Amarot appear as arcane entities. So that should be enough to dispel with the soul alive discussion there. But the other thing
that's a good question. I wonder what Y'shtola would have seen if she went into living memory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is weird that she didn't.
I wonder why they made her stay behind. I wonder
Yeah.
if that
I
was
wonder.
intentional.
I
I wonder if
wonder.
it's one of the things that's continuing to bother me.
Yeah. There's a lot.
So, but the other thing about Pandemonium, which is I don't want to make a full judgment yet on Pandemonium, is because it's basically the Pandemonium was basically just our immediate first previous expansions rate. So sometimes, I mean, they often take maybe 1-2 expansions to become relevant. So that's why I'm holding up there as to make my judgments on Pandemonium as to how relevant it may be. But of course, there's Ultima there, so there's that.
So we have one more topic I want to get into, and we come up several times throughout this episode, and we were discussing it briefly before the show started. I want to talk about the multiverse and the potentiality that brings. And I know Synodic, you and Ayumi both are probably going to have some words on the same page about this.
That depends. You want to take the dog off the leash here?
Yeah, let's go, because so going back to Heaven's Word, I've argued that there is a multiverse in 14. It's been established. With the 8th Umbral era, it's been solidified, and now what's your take about the game potentially diving into this direction?
I am entirely against it.
Yep.
I wasn't a fan introduction in Shadowbringers, and I'm still not a fan. Mostly on the grounds of something very simple. The fundamental fact that the story hasn't even finished telling this world's tale. The writers have not even concluded telling the story of this world, its history, its people. We have so many locations in this world that people have been wanting to visit for years now. Like, people have been wanting to visit Marasidia since ARR. Like, people have been wanting to learn more about these other locations for so long. And the idea that entirely different worlds or timelines or whatever will take up that very precious and valuable screen time, I find a little upsetting, because it dilutes the experiences that you should be having in this world, in this setting. Because at the end of the day, while we did have fun in the first, and I had fun in the first, I thought Shadowbringers had a lot of amazing storytelling moments. At the end of the day, though, what we did over there has nothing to do with the source. Like, none of what we did over there ultimately means anything to us. Because, again, those events are isolated to the first, for the most part. There are a few things that cross, but 95% of what we did over there means nothing to the MSQ on the source. And I feel like we're going to have more and more stories of that if we choose to go across other timelines, other dimensions, stuff like that. Like we just said, with Elpis, I concluded a long time ago that ultimately the Warrior of Light being there means nothing to the story. Those events would have happened regardless either way. The characters would have made the same choices, and the events still would have played out the same way. So again, it didn't matter.
Yep.
I would much rather we spend time with this world, with these characters, these things that we've yet to understand and elaborate on, long before touching space travel, time travel, interdimensional travel. Look at Marvel and DC Comics.
Yeah.
And how messy their storytelling got the moment they started doing cross-dimensional crap. Like, it's so uninspired, I feel, is the word I'm looking for.
It kept me from just going into the cinema and watching another Marvel movie. Like, I used to be excited to go see them. Now it's just like, what's going to end up like this?
It just feels very uninspired, because any writer can make up their own thing in another reality. It takes a talented person to work within an already established framework and to make it blossom into something beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's just I understand a lot of people love time travel, a lot of people love space travel, and a lot of people love interdimensional stuff. And I'm not saying they're wrong for loving that stuff. I personally would much prefer the writers tell this world's story first and then explore other avenues. That's just me.
No, I completely agree.
I'm in agreement. I've said this multiple times across the show in our 3 years of doing this. I dislike time travel. I dislike multiple timelines. I dislike multiple dimensions. And one of the primary reasons for doing so is that there was something recently said in the Spanish interview that Yoshida did when he was over there.
Oh,
He said that there was an infinite number of reflections. Now, whether or not that was a literal translation or a kind of mistranslation, that still goes against the established lore not only in the game, but across several pieces of media and across several different developer interviews and lore panels.
Yeah,
So now we go from going against the source material, but to 10 years of already established lore and throwing it in the trash. And it breaks not only that, but it breaks several things along that route. And now we go from all these theories that we've come up with, they're gone too. I mean, we're not salty about them. We are just, we want an explanation as to why this was reversed at the last moment.
Well, it hasn't been yet.
Well, he can't.
Just
yeah,
an interview, guys.
There's always a chance for someone to disappoint you.
Yeah.
There have been many retcons along the way, which they've been minor, kind of.
Oh my gosh, you got some people that play this game that think a retcon has never happened in 14.
Are you serious?
Yeah. No, it's happened.
Yeah, you got people that legitimately think that Final Fantasy 14's writing is airtight.
The game
No.
1.0.
Yeah.
The game itself is okay. All right, that broke me. I need coffee after this. That is what got me.
So
You need
this
coffee or
was said
vodka.
by the developers. They wanted to create a good game. They didn't really much care about the story. They just wanted to create a good game. And they didn't start thinking about the story, until about Heaven's Order Stormblood. And then they started creating a world built upon that lore. So to go back to that was one thing that I wanted to touch on also, is that things said in the past may not always be true in the future. What they can establish then, they may not always run with now. It's a constant game that's being updated. And just like AAA games that have been in development for years, plans constantly go into flux, things can get changed at the last moment. It's not like I defend this, but with a story-driven game like 14, it's more or less a hindrance than it is a benefit. It doesn't help with the polish, it actually makes it more abrasive. And then going back to time travel, we messed with this with Alexander, and I was really hoping we would kind of confine it to just that raid, and instead we used it for several different plot points throughout the story, including the plot for Shadowbringers. Because now you go from looking at different endings for a certain event to multiple endings for a certain event. Okay, we have to avert this to avoid this, and if we avoid this, another thing will happen along this, and you're writing yourself into a corner if you go the time travel route, because somewhere eventually along the line you're going to run into a dead end that you can't write yourself out of. I know some people are gonna get what I'm about to say, and some aren't, and people are gonna think I'm a weeb for this too. But the Fate series,
All Are we sure we want to touch that from a lore standpoint?
No, I'm just giving
Are
that
we
as an
sure?
example. I'm
Right
just
in
giving that
front
as an
of my
example.
salad.
That's a convoluted piece of mess too that messes with timelines and multiverses and all that. And it's the
Look, I
same
mean,
with the.
Fate Universe is dangerously close to being Kingdom Hearts bad.
I was going to mention that next.
No.
Kingdom Hearts. That was another one.
God, Kingdom Hearts is one of the worst written stories I've ever seen.
So that's an example of multiverses and time travel being written in such a convoluted way that the fan base just doesn't take them seriously anymore and just plays them for the sake of, oh, I kind of like this character, but that's it. I like how they look and I like how they act, but I don't like their story because it doesn't make sense. And so we don't want to think about that for our characters that we love and find so endearing. We want to understand why they did what they did and have them continue on that direct path, that linear path, instead of go all these different directions. And we find, we go to another reflection. Oh, suddenly we find Yashola's great-great-grandmother.
And it kind of goes back to, we've been talking about this pretty much the whole episode, but Synodic, the thing that you were saying of does it matter to the MSQ in terms of is this important lore-wise? My whole thing is if it becomes a multiverse, then what was the point of anything that we've done?
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
It diminishes the quality of every emotional moment that we've had previously because there's some world where it just didn't matter, right? And to have to hop between those in like the multiverse style thing, Cobb has called this lazy writing. I just think it's disappointing because it diminishes the quality of the story already told.
It's a callback to what they kind of did in 1.0, and from a technical standpoint, not from a story standpoint, from a technical standpoint, what they did in 1.0 was they based everything off of script writing, not actual development writing, but script writing to make the game run. And the reason they did that was because the developers wanted a quick and easy way to kind of get the game up and running. They didn't want to interact with each other, didn't want to talk with each other, just base everything off of scripts. Back then in 2011, 2010, there wasn't computers that were sophisticated enough to run those. So they essentially created a CPU bottleneck that 14 couldn't run on, basically.
Yep.
If you ask me in terms of what I think about the multiverse, I think we're going to briefly dip our toes in multiverse because I do believe with all the clues they're basically dropping that inevitably we're going to visit the 8th Umbrella era. But I don't think we're going to dip into this sort of multiverse per se. They're mentioning it existing, but I don't think it's going to become a crucial part of it. I think one of the points, maybe this is kind of like speculation, but I think the outcome inevitably will be kind of erasing this multiverse because it's more a problem than a solution. So I think we're going to dip our toes on it, but not fully. I think there's going to be kind of a direction, but not the ultimate direction of 14. It's just like...
God, I'd hope not.
Yeah, but that becomes the thing again where it's like, then why even bring it up? Why make a big deal out of it,
If
right?
it's not important, why even care?
Exactly.
Like, there's so many other things that the writers could be focusing on that would be interesting, other than just giving us another timeline or world where the events ultimately don't affect or matter to us.
No, but I think in this case, I think it's this case that deep into, in this case, what I'm thinking from the notes and stuff for the 8th Emerald era, it would affect our timeline. I'm not going to bother and bore you with details on that because also we don't have time for that. But I do think it's going to be important. But later, after that, we're going to go back to the source, to the problems of the source and stuff. Basically, so I think it's going to be a brief deep into that, and it's going to be relevant, but not like the end game of, so to speak. So
I think we're going to like have
hope.
maybe half an expansion on it, and then explain why.
Well, I mean, again, while we're on the topic, look at the post Endwalker story with the Void with Zero.
Oh yeah.
None
no.
of that ended up mattering, did it?
Nope.
No.
It did not affect the MSQ. It did not affect the world building. We gained almost nothing from that event, and yet they dedicated an entire post-expansion story to it.
We got characters that we thought we were going to stick with, and they threw them away.
Oh goodness, I'm glad we didn't stick around with Zero.
The only redeeming scene that we got out of that entire patch series was the Gaia introduction to the MSQ.
Oh, that was great. I loved that.
That was
Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
for having her back.
it just
Thank you.
though personally, I just have a vendetta against that entire post MSQ story because we had just had a universe-ending calamity, and now we're not even going to talk about it.
Yep.
Like this literally just happened, and now we're going to pretend like, oh, everyone's fine now. Go to the Void, Warrior of Light. He's like, what? No, there are things that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
There's characters who need to go to therapy.
Exactly.
We don't have time for this right now.
There's so much else to talk about other than to give lip service to easily one of the most teenager-written characters I've ever seen in this game.
Yep. And that was my complaint about Dawntrail even, actually, is that Zeralja, his entire position should have been a reaction to the final days, saying what happened was so horrible for Taral, and so many people died because we were not ready. We need to be ready for the next whatever comes. And that should have been his
I would have
starting
loved
point.
that.
Yeah.
It would have tied back to Endwalker. It would have given a meaningful explanation as to why he went from, like, maybe not a nice guy, but to suddenly a bastard.
Yeah.
Like,
But we got
that
none of that.
makes sense. Why? And that's my biggest critique of Final Fantasy XIV's writing is right there. They do not take advantage of their own work half the time, and they just interject their own new stuff to try and explain things away. No, just use what was already created. It's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. Use it.
Yeah.
It's
You
like
don't
they
need to
look at
create
names.
Dynamis. Just use Aether like you've always have been.
Yeah.
It's like they create new names for stuff, and then they look back at things like, oh, I guess this ties to this because of this, and then suddenly retcon pops up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It gives me a headache sometimes.
It really does.
The thing about the Void Arc, the Void Arc to me is, I was annoyed to the extreme with the Final Fantasy IV copy pastors. Like, this is lazy writing.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh yeah, not
Yeah.
only did we get a story that had nothing to do with Endwalker, but a story that's just essentially Final Fantasy IV. And this is actually the first time that another Final Fantasy game reference was forced into the MSQ instead of side content.
Yeah.
I maintain that the entirety of like the MSQ from the patch content in Endwalker would have worked really well as a trial series.
Yes.
The pacing would have worked so much better, and it could serve to enhance a story about coming out of Endwalker and like dealing with the like gravitas of all of not just the emotional shit that happened, the trauma, but also like the world revelations that we now have, because you didn't get a chance to sit with any of these new discoveries before you were off to Vanaspati and trying to save the world, right? You came back and you had to hit the ground running. I maintain that like I would have really enjoyed the story as a trial series because it would have been more condensed, and then we could have gotten more of what we were actually looking for after like the main events of the story, right? Because it still would have served to tie everything up without being a huge lead-in to the next expansion. But it wouldn't have been as drawn out and, as you said, Meowth, copy-paste from the actual FF4 stuff.
If they had just made that entire Void story the same way they did with Sorrows of Werlet,
Yes.
Oh,
it would have been fine.
perfect.
Yes.
I wouldn't have any complaints.
Warlet was perfect to me. It's
Like-
likely one of, if not the best trial series for me, story-wise.
Like, yeah, it was. I would have had no notes. because at least then it wouldn't have taken up the MSQ's valuable time. But that's not what we got, and I'm going to harumph about it.
I think the main, from a more meta-narrative point of view, I think the Void Arc serves to introduce the concept of an external, I mean, not alien per se, but an external force invading the source. It could be either invading from the reflections, it could be either invading another timeline, invading on timeline, which is kind of like, I suspect it maybe happening here as well. But I think it's the concept of there's external forces, not cosmic, abstract apotheosis happening, but also within our very reality that can threaten the source. That's one thing that I can draw from that. The problem, even if this was the introduction, the problem with it is that they shoved it into basically a rehash of 4. So it's like I had to drag myself to finish the patch content because I was like, oh, I don't care about 4. I don't say it's a bad game. Surely it's good, but I don't want to play 4 here.
See,
I'm not a fan.
My issue is that it was copy pasted, and 14 has done a really good job of taking elements from other Final Fantasy games and weaving them together into this cohesive narrative. And this just felt like Final Fantasy IV, beat for beat, just plunked down into the game.
The only thing that was missing was making Xenos and Golbez related in some way.
Oh God, don't. Not again. And it's like, that's especially disappointing, Cobb, because I've talked about this before, but how much of Dawntrail really was just a love letter to the first expansion in 11, right? Because it is the story from that, told in a unique, fresh way, and they did a really, really good job with it. So coming off of that and then looking back at the patch content and how they did that too, I'm like, the fights were fun, but that was also when they started introducing a whole bunch of accessibility issues, which that's purely gameplay, but there was an element of just kind of putting things in there that, I don't know, it should have been a child series. I would have had no complaints about that whole thing if it was a child series.
Yeah, and the first 3 patches should have been recovery from the final days.
Yep.
Like, that should have served to show how bad it really got. Because we didn't really get to see that, aside from Favner.
Yes, there's that vibe right after 6.0. I do wonder if it's deliberate. That it kind of feels like nothing's happened, everything's fine, and I do have to wonder if it's a deliberate choice because of some themes going into Dawntrail, but without solid footing as to say this is the actual intention. It's 50-50 deliberate, it's 50-50 not well written. I don't know. I'm partial here. I'm kind of
I think this actually touches on a topic that I personally have trouble discussing with the casual player, but I feel like I'm comfortable enough to discuss it with all of you, being fellow lore enthusiasts, is the fact that Final Fantasy XIV's writing or story is constantly touted as being like the best MMO story of all time. And while I'm not saying that it's bad, the best, I feel, is a bit of a stretch. I think the writers for Final Fantasy XIV have done an amazing job. I wouldn't have made more than 200 lore videos for this game if I didn't like it.
Your passion is noted.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I wouldn't have made so much content about this game if I didn't think they hadn't already done an amazing job. And that's why I make the videos. I want to celebrate their good work. But at the same time, as someone who has his nose to the grindstone so often and like takes note of every little thing that they say and do every now and then, it's not a flawless story.
No.
It's not a perfect story by a long shot. In fact, they make quite obvious and consistent literary mistakes during some very distinct parts in the MSQ that I kind of sit there and go like, were you even thinking that day? Like, were you considering the implications of this statement? And it's hard to have that conversation with the casual player because a lot of people have convinced themselves that 14's writing is perfect, that it is flawless, and everything that they do is just a setup for something else, and they're thinking 10 stages ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not.
They do the opposite.
They've admitted that they aren't.
They write backwards. It's different.
Exactly. Like, we love the story and lore of Final Fantasy 14, but it has room for improvement, for sure.
Absolutely.
100%.
I
think,
will
however,
say,
go.
let me really quick. I will say I absolutely agree. The writing is far from flawless in 14. What I think 14 does best is how it presents the story. That's the thing that I think set it apart.
I would agree that it does a good job trying. It sinks its claws into you easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where the strength of Final Fantasy 14's writing is.
So anyway, yeah.
And it's also sorry, Meowth, go ahead.
Sorry. It's basically the thing about discussing with the casual player. I've seen this a lot of times. Like, I do love Shadowbringers. I think it's by far the best of the expansions. But there's some choices in Shadowbringers that I perhaps myself I would have been more ballsy when it comes to Shadowbringers. But it's okay. It's fine. They were already quite bold when it comes to Shadowbringers. I don't know if I should explain why, but well, summarized, it's a bold move. As I consulted with other fellow, not related to 14, people who analyze narrative. The thing about the connection between the Warrior of Light and Hades being the kind of like, well, this main antagonist. This is a very bold choice because it's basically tying the player character to not just another character, but also kind of like the antagonist. This is very bold, and I've known people who said it could have been a brilliant move or a complete failure. It was like there was no in between. It would have either go very wrong or very well. It went well, fortunately, but it was a very bold choice. But when it comes after Shadowbringers, it comes to Endwalker. I've seen so much people overpraising Endwalker. It's weird. I don't know. I think Lore Divers tend to drag Endwalker more than the casual player does. I don't know if it's guys get the same impression. But when trying to discuss Endwalker with casual players, it's very hard because they're like, this is the greatest end of the arc, and I'm like, no, it's full of holes everywhere. It's
no,
basically
you're not alone in that one. I get that. I get the same response all the time. Like, oh, this was the greatest finale to a 10-year story ever, and I'm sitting here over like, are you kidding me?
I mean, I'm a lore person, and I am in the boat of absolutely adoring it, but that's also because, like, I was looking to get different things out of it than y'all, I think, but I also...
Oh, no, I'm not saying it was a bad story. I'm just saying, as far as a lore standpoint is concerned, it's... oh, boy.
Right, yeah, but that's also the thing where, like, something can be imperfect and still be a thing that you adore.
Oh, yeah.
I would challenge anybody to find a perfect story, because you're not going to. Because by nature of us engaging with this thing that we love, it's going to be a deeply personal experience, regardless of the level at which you engage with it. I forgot where I was going with that. That's my statement.
Something, artist objective, la la la.
Yeah, well, no, not so much that, but more for the sake of, like, I will continue to love this thing, even if it's making some story choices that I don't like or don't agree with, because there will always be story choices that I do love, and that I continue to go back to and re-experience. Right? So there's always going to be, like, something detracting from it, but at the end of the day, I'm still here. I'm still loving the story. Like,
same.
we might go through a rough patch here for a bit, but I will still be around, and by God, will I find a way to explain it to people who maybe have not paid attention.
I feel like that's the crux of the debate at the end of the day. It's like, we must be allowed to say that Final Fantasy XIV's writing has had rough patches at some point. We need to be allowed to have that discussion. We need to be allowed to have that conversation. And it feels like the casual audience of 14 does not want to. They want to be able to say that their MMO is perfect.
It's a confirmation bias.
Exactly.
What's happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. They want to be able to say that they're special in having the perfect MMO, and I'm like,
Right.
well, no,
And
not
it's-
really.
But that's not how it should work. Because
No.
if we keep saying that it's perfect, we're not giving the developers motivation to be better.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like
And
they
it's-
need to know that they screwed up at certain points, and they need to maybe address it.
And it's one of those things too where like two things can be true at once, right? You can love this thing and it can be flawed. You can think that something is good and someone else can think that something is bad. Those things coexist, right? That's kind of where I feel the disconnect for a lot of Dawntrail's perception has come in, is everyone wants to be right. And that's not just about their opinions, it's also about like the actual canon of the game, and that line just seems to be so blurred with the release of this expansion in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people take it like personal when you're disagreeing with them. People take it like a personal attack to them. That's another problem there. Like it's hard
It's
to
because
debate.
they mentally connect their opinion to themselves.
Mhm.
Like, so if I attack their opinion, suddenly they take it personally because, well, it's my idea, therefore you must hate me. No, I just hate your idea.
I can separate
Yeah.
ideas from the person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's very simple. But no, we love Final Fantasy XIV. We can all say that's why we're having this podcast. Final Fantasy
Right.
XIV is an amazing MMO. We've all gotten something beautiful from this experience, and I think that's something that should be celebrated. But
Absolutely.
I also believe it's not beyond reason to want to ask the waiter for something other than the same meal we've been presented 3 expansions in a row.
Yeah.
Yep. Hard
That's
agree
my
with that.
comfort food.
Yeah, well, we can get you a coupon for the next deal then.
Aw, thanks.
Well, that said, I could probably keep going on with this conversation all day, but we are
Same.
running short on time.
Oh, that's the problem when you get a bunch of lore lovers in the
I
same room
know.
together. We could talk like this forever.
Absolutely. But Synodic, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been an awesome conversation. Hope to have you back on the show again soon. So
course,
thank you,
anytime.
everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Love talking with you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in the chat. We will be back again next week. So, Synodic, where can people find your stuff?
You can find me at Synodic Scribe on YouTube. I also have links to my Twitter, I guess now X, personal channel, Discord, and other things within the description of every video. So if you're interested in following me or reaching out to me with your own lore questions, don't be afraid to ask me on my personal Discord. And other than that, I'm just happy to keep growing and encouraging the lore side of Final Fantasy XIV's community because I feel like it's been underrepresented for way too long.
Absolutely agree. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a great week.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.
Stay safe.